Today we're going to learn about adaptations. Adaptations are basically things that organisms do in order to survive in their environment. There's two different main types of adaptations. There's physical and behavioral, and today we're going to focus on the physical adaptations that animals use in order to survive and reproduce. So what is an adaptation? It can be physical or behavioral, so it can be something physical or it can be a type of behavior that an animal adopts or uses. It helps the animal to survive and or reproduce. All animals are adapted to live in certain habitats. So basically, if an animal lives in a habitat and if that species survives in that habitat for very long, it means that it's adapted to that habitat in order to be able to survive there and reproduce. If an animal cannot adapt, or if a species cannot adapt to its environment, or if a species environment changes so drastically and so quickly that it cannot adapt, that animal or that species will end up dying out in that environment. It will not be able to survive. So again, there's two categories, physical and behavioral. Physical adaptations, the animal has pretty much no control over. They are all basically adaptations that have developed over time in nature for that animal to be able to survive in its environment. Behavioral adaptations are basically adaptations where animals behave in certain ways, and that behavior allows them to survive. Again, today we're going to focus on physical. So, one type of physical adaptation is basically called camouflage. Oh, sorry, but let me back up. So physical adaptations are basically, let's start there. Physical adaptations are body structures that allow an animal to find and consume food, defend itself, and reproduce as a species. So physical adaptation is basically something about an organism's body or its body structure, and it helps it to survive. For instance, this walking stick here has adapted over long periods of time in nature so that it looks exactly like a twig or a stick, and therefore it's able to stand or on twigs and sticks and not be very noticeable to birds. It blends in with its environment, and that keeps it from birds from noticing it and being able to eat it. So what are some physical adaptations? Well, the first one is protective coloring. Different animals have different types of protective coloring that allow them to survive. And for an example of that is camouflage. Camouflage is where you basically make yourself the same color as your surroundings in order to blend in with your surroundings. It is a great way for an animal to avoid being eaten by a predator, because if the animal is able to blend in with its environment, then in general it doesn't get eaten by predators as easily. Our example here is the chameleon here can change its color so that it matches the leaves that it's next to or on a tree. Another type of coloration is called mimicry. This is where an animal makes it, or an organism makes itself look like another type of animal or organism. So a great example of this is the viceroy butterfly and the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterfly is poisonous, which means if an animal or a bird eats that butterfly, basically the bird will end up being poisoned and could possibly die. So birds avoid eating monarch butterflies because they don't want to, die from the poison. The viceroy butterfly, on the other hand, is not poisonous at all. But over time, it has adapted to look exactly or almost exactly like a monarch butterfly. In doing so, birds also avoid eating the viceroy, and the viceroy is able to survive even though the viceroy is not actually poisonous. So mimicry is where one organism tries to look like another organism. I believe another example is the king snake and the coral snake. One of them is deadly, the other is not, and they're both a mixture of black, red, and white colors. So other physical adaptations other than coloring are chemical defenses. Many animals have developed chemical defenses such as venom and inks and sprays in order to defend themselves and allow themselves to survive. Again, an example is an octopus. An octopus has developed an ink-like defense to where if it feels threatened, it will basically release ink into the water. That ink makes the water very cloudy, and then the octopus can get away from its predator, and the predator can't see it. Another example is a skunk. A skunk basically has developed a spray that it sprays that smells very bad, and so if it feels threatened, it will spray other animals, making such a horrible smell that they don't want to come anywhere near it. Venom is another example of a physical adaptation or a chemical defense. For instance, snakes have venom and are able to defend themselves that way. Another example of physical adaptations are body parts or body coverings. Many animals have developed different body parts and body coverings in order to be able to protect themselves and survive in their environment. For instance, we're going to talk a lot about birds because the state of Arizona is big on birds. Birds have developed certain beaks in order to survive. Some birds have very long, sharp beaks that are curved for tearing into flesh. Other birds have long beaks that are straight, that burrow into trees to gather insects. Other birds have flat beaks, which allow them to basically scoop up water and eat fish. Other birds have tiny little small sharp beaks which allow them to penetrate seeds and break into seeds. So birds' beaks alone have developed over many years in nature in order to allow them to be able to eat different foods based on their environment. Other things though, claws, feet, armored plates, skulls, teeth. This elephant's trunk has developed over time to allow it to eat and drink and pick up things and clean itself. If you think about it, an elephant is a very large animal. It would be very difficult for it to just roll around in water and get itself clean. So it's developed this long trunk that allows it to spray water on itself so that it can clean itself. Again, here are the birds that I was talking about. You'll notice that basically the spoonbill and the pelican have very flat beaks. These allow them to catch all kinds of fish in the water. It allows them to scoop up water and catch fish with, basically the water they've scooped up. You'll notice the falcon and the eagle all have very kind of long curved beaks. These curved beaks are meant to tear flesh, and so they basically are flesh eaters. You'll notice things like the curlew has a very long pointy beak, and the heron has a very long pointy beak. These will allow them to basically drill into a tree and be able to pull insects out of trees. Finches, sparrows, these have very short, sharp little beaks. Those beaks are great for tearing into seeds and actually breaking apart seeds. So all of these birds have developed these physical adaptations in their beaks in order to survive and be able to eat wherever they live. Other physical adaptations are not just for animals, and they are also for plants. Different plants we've talked about before have developed different ways of pollinating. Some of them pollinate through water, some of them pollinate through the wind, some of them pollinate through insects, and so they've all developed different physical structures inside of their flowers in order to allow pollination to happen based on where they live. Seed dispersal, same thing. Different plant species have developed different ways of dispersing their seeds. Coconuts drop into the water and the water carries them, whereas an apple tree will basically grow fruit so that an animal can eat that fruit, whereas a dandelion basically has all kinds of little tiny white puffy things on it, and the seeds travel through the air. So pollination and seed dispersal are other ways that plants have actually developed physical adaptations, changed the way that they work in order to survive.